In the early 14th century, the reign of King Philip IV of France was at its peak. Nicknamed Philip the Fair for his strikingly handsome appearance, he was known for his cold and ruthless character. Contemporaries described his rule as neither human nor beast, but a statue. In his early years, Philip married Joan, the last ruler of Navarre, incorporating Navarre and the Champagne region into France and significantly expanding the royal domain. Philip IV's conflict with the Catholic Church in France was intense, marked by two actions that shocked Europe. First, he dismantled the renowned Knights Templar and confiscated their vast wealth. Second, he summoned the Pope to Avignon, effectively reducing the papacy to a French vassal for many years. However, within the court of this handsome and iron-fisted king, one of the most scandalous royal adultery cases of the Middle Ages unfolded. The fallout from this scandal was devastating for the Capetian dynasty, triggering a domino effect that eventually led to the 100 Years' War between England and France. Philip IV and his wife Joan grew up together and had a close and loving relationship after their marriage. Philip remained deeply loyal to Joan, and after her death, he never had any affairs. An extraordinary fact for a handsome king. Their deeply moving marriage was also fruitful, producing 3 sons and a daughter: Louis, Philip, Charles, and Isabella. Philip carefully orchestrated political marriages for his children. His 3 sons married daughters of the powerful Burgundian family, Margaret, Joan, and Blanche, while his daughter Isabella was wed to King Edward II of England. Between 1305 and 1308, the French court hosted grand ceremonies to welcome 3 women from Burgundy into the royal family. Louis married Margaret, Philip wed Joan, and Charles took Blanche as his wife. Among the 3 daughters-in-law, the eldest, Margaret, and the second, Joan, were sisters of illustrious lineage. Their father was Robert II, Duke of Burgundy, and their mother, Agnes of France, was a French princess and Philip IV's aunt. Remarkably, this made the 2 daughters-in-law and their father-in-law, Philip IV, first cousins. However, since Agnes and Philip IV were only 8 years apart in age, the 2 women were actually contemporaries of Philip IV's sons. In short, the familial connections were notably intricate. The third daughter-in-law, Blanche, hailed from a neighboring domain, the Free County of Burgundy, as the daughter of its ruler. When the 3 women entered the French royal court, they were all quite young. The eldest, Margaret, was only 15, still in her adolescence. Their arrival brought a fresh burst of color to the conservative court of Philip IV. The 3 young women were beautiful, lively, and rebellious, quickly becoming celebrated as muses in Parisian society. Coming from the affluent and culturally vibrant region of Burgundy, they were passionate about music, art, poetry, and fashion. They frequently hosted gatherings, entertained guests, enjoyed wine, and danced at soirees. However, their openly liberal lifestyle displeased Philip IV, whose primary concern was for his daughters-in-law to bear heirs for the French crown, rather than spend their days reveling in enjoyment. Among the 3 royal couples, only the second prince, Philip, and his wife Joan had a relatively good relationship. It was said that Philip was quite infatuated with Joan and frequently wrote her romantic letters. In contrast, the marriages of Crown Prince Louis and the third Prince Charles were much less fortunate. Margaret and Blanche showed little interest in their husbands, and their relationships were at best lukewarm. Due to their relatively carefree lives at court, rumors began to circulate about the 2 queens. Some even claimed they had found new lovers, though these accusations lacked concrete evidence. Philip IV largely dismissed the gossip, reasoning that beautiful women often attracted baseless speculation. The turning point came in 1314, when their youngest sister, Isabella, visited Paris with her husband, King Edward II of England. During the royal banquet held to welcome them, Isabella noticed something startling. The silk purses she had gifted to her sisters-in-law, Margaret and Blanche, were now hanging from the belts of two young noblemen. These purple silk purses, adorned with intricate gold embroidery, were highly valuable and custom-made, making it nearly impossible for them to be replicated. Could the rumors of infidelity involving her sisters-in-law be true? Troubled by this discovery, Isabella spent a sleepless night deliberating and eventually reported the matter to her father, Philip IV. This provided Philip IV with a solid reason to launch an investigation into his daughters-in-law. His calculated and pragmatic approach to the scandal was characteristic of his cold and rational nature. Unlike a typical feudal patriarch who might have erupted in rage and demanded immediate punishment for the suspected adulterers, Philip recognized that the purses alone were insufficient evidence. They could easily have been gifts, lost and found, or even coincidentally reproduced. Acting prematurely might only alert the suspects. After careful consideration, Philip IV ordered the secret surveillance of Margaret, Blanche, and their rumored lovers, the noble brothers Gautier and Philippe d'Aunay from Normandy. Over time, the surveillance confirmed that Margaret and Blanche frequently met the d'Aunay brothers in the Nesle Tower opposite the Louvre. There, they indulged in food, drink, and entertainment, spending pleasant nights together. Additionally, the second prince's wife, Joan, was found to be complicit in the affairs, fully aware of her sisters-in-law's infidelity. With irrefutable evidence in hand, Philip IV ordered the arrest of his three daughters-in-law and the d'Aunay brothers. The d'Aunay brothers were immediately thrown into prison and subjected to brutal torture. Under interrogation, both confessed to committing adultery with the queens. Despite their confessions, they were shown no mercy. The brothers were sentenced to France's harshest punishment, death by torture. Their demise was so gruesome that it is inappropriate to describe in detail here. Following their execution, all servants who worked at the Nesle Tower were also put to death. This merciless response underscored Philip IV's notorious cold-bloodedness. The three queens fell into despair. After admitting to adultery, Margaret and Blanche were shorn of their hair, dressed in sackcloth, and imprisoned in dungeons. The other accomplice, Joan, confessed only to harboring the secret, but adamantly denied any adultery. Her husband, Philip, pleaded for her, believing she had not betrayed him. Since there was no solid evidence against Joan, she was ultimately placed under solitary confinement in a castle rather than in a dungeon. This scandal seemed to deal a heavy blow to Philip IV's spirit, and by the end of 1314, he passed away. Margaret and Blanche were moved from the dungeons to castle imprisonment. When Crown Prince Louis ascended the throne, it did nothing to alter Margaret's grim fate. In fact, her situation worsened. Louis loathed Margaret for her betrayal and actively sought an annulment of their marriage through the church. Before the matter could be resolved, Margaret suddenly died. Was it natural causes or murder? The truth remains buried. What we do know is that Louis remarried within months. However, Louis's own life was tragically short. In 1316, after a game of tennis, he fell ill and died suddenly, leaving behind a posthumous child. Tragically, the infant died just 5 days after birth. This was the beginning of the domino effect triggered by the Nesle Tower scandal. By custom, Louis left no male heir. However, he did have a daughter, Joan, with his first wife, Margaret. At the time, France had not yet fully adopted the Salic law, which excluded women from royal succession, and under the inheritance customs of other nations, Joan's claim to the throne would have been entirely reasonable. Yet, due to the scandal surrounding her mother Margaret's adultery, Joan's legitimacy was called into question. Led by Louis's brother, Philip, French nobles doubted that Joan was Louis's biological child. This uncertainty ignited a succession crisis. At this point, Philip invoked the Salic law, a centuries-old, long-forgotten statute gathering dust in legal obscurity, which excluded women from inheriting the French throne. Philip's appeal to the Salic law secured his victory, and he ascended to the throne. His wife, Joan, was acquitted of all charges and became Queen of France. However, Philip's triumph was short-lived. Despite his loyalty to Joan during her time of need, their marriage produced 7 children, but only 4 daughters survived into adulthood. Due to the Salic law, none of them could inherit the throne. When Philip died in 1322, the crown passed to his younger brother, Charles. As one of the survivors of the Nesle Tower scandal, Joan became a wealthy widow after Philip's death. Interestingly, her place of residence during her widowhood was a villa near the Nesle Tower itself. Joan died at the age of 37. Now let us turn to Charles. Charles ascended the throne in 1322, and like his brother before him, he could not forgive his wife, Blanche. Upon becoming king, Charles immediately petitioned the church for an annulment of their marriage. In May, the Pope granted the annulment, and Charles sent Blanche to a convent. Shortly after, Blanche died in the convent, reportedly due to health issues stemming from her time imprisoned in the dungeon. Charles remarried twice during his reign, but neither union produced a son. With no male heirs, the main Capetian line came to an abrupt end, and the throne passed to the Valois branch of the family. The domino effect of the Nesle Tower scandal did not end there. News of Charles's lack of an heir reached across the English Channel, where Edward III, son of Isabella, grew restless. Edward argued that the Salic law excluded daughters from succession, but not their sons. Since his mother, Isabella, was a French princess, Edward claimed a legitimate right to the French throne. While his reasoning may have been questionable, it was sufficient justification for the powerful and ambitious Edward to declare war on France following Charles's death. Thus, the 100 Years' War was set into motion,